Yes, we can hear you. Doctor.
Okay, excellent. So I'll share my screen. Hello,
you.
Professor Ivy, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
And do you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, excellent. So let me begin my talk. And today I would like to give you an introductory lecture on lithium-ion batteries, their traditional and emerging applications, and also provide some remarks on certain types of batteries under development. This is my talk outline. So this will be briefly in 3 parts. So first, I would like to talk about some of the applications of batteries. And of course, nowadays, many of these applications are enabled by the dominant battery system, which is a lithium-ion battery. So we will, of course, dwell a little bit on their principle of operation and different types of these batteries that you can currently encounter in practice. And in the end of the talk, I would like to make remarks on new battery systems under development. Some of those battery systems will be sort of offshoots from the traditional lithium-ion battery technology. And I will also touch upon sodium-ion batteries a little bit. So first, let's look at applications. And of course, all of you are well familiar with traditional applications of batteries, right? And I don't need to explain what batteries are to this audience, right? So in traditional applications, you would probably see small scale cells or small packs. And you may be familiar with things like coin cells, which are used in watches and computer motherboards, with cylindrical batteries, with sort of flat batteries for your laptops and stuff like this. And these are fully capable of enabling small scale applications. And one of such applications is portable electronics, where we can use laptops, mobile phones, and of course, all of us currently have a lot of these very useful devices. And you can also utilize them in power tools, right? So you have a lot of things like sort of cordless drills and other instrumentation of this nature for your trade activities. And of course, traditionally, all the cars also use batteries. And this may be a familiar look to anybody who owns not electric, but rather old-fashioned car still at this point. Currently, however, we have a strong drift from those traditional applications to also new emerging applications of batteries. And these applications include the following. So one of the big ones is the deployment of batteries in the grid, right? So this is a picture of one of big batteries that are installed in Australia, in South Australia state. And you sort of use them to avoid blackouts in the grid, to also make sure that you don't have any violations in voltage in the grid or frequency. So they're very useful sort of to enabling this reliable power supply to households, suburbs, and cities in the grid. A variation of this are the batteries that you can have at home. And now in many countries, there is a strong trend to shift to sort of generating energy at home, to be a little bit grid independent when needed. And this is normally achieved by solar cells, which may be installed on the roofs, for example, of buildings or houses. But of course, solar cells might work better if you also have a battery in household, because battery provide additional security for your energy supply. For example, you may want to consume power during the time where it's not sunny, or during the time where there is no other generation happening in your place. And the battery allows you to do exactly this. It allows you to shift power and achieve sort of electricity supply in the house in a moment where, for example, it's night or there is no supply at the moment. And of course, very strong and probably the #1 emerging application of batteries currently is in electric cars. And I understand this is very topical for this conference. And electric cars really forecasted to be the largest consumer of lithium-ion batteries which are being produced at the moment and into the future years and decades. Now, let me talk a little bit more about some of these applications, and I will sort of start in the same order. So I will first talk about large-scale batteries that can be deployed in the grid. And because I'm from the Australian National University, I will try to provide, I guess, more of an Australian context where possible in this space. And interestingly, Australia is really one of the global leaders in the emergent use of these big batteries in the grid. So this, the whole story sort of started in 2015, 2016, where in South Australia, there were events which damaged transmission lines. You can see this, how this happens in the picture. And unfortunately, this caused massive blackouts in the state of South Australia. So after this, the local government was quite interested to remove this problematic behavior. And also, they're quite advanced in a way because they have very large penetration of renewables in the grid in that particular area. So in order to accommodate those renewables and make sure that grid is stable, Tesla was contracted to supply and install the battery. And this was 100 megawatts, 125 megawatt hours installation, which happened in the end of 2017. And apparently that was a big success. Since then, pretty much blackouts were avoided. The battery takes very short time to engage, and it also cost effective. It produces significant costs in cost gain in running the grid. So you can see that it actually generates profit by being there. Now, subsequently to this, many places in Australia were quite interested in following this path. So there were numerous projects in South Australia and Victoria. And also recently, there are batteries installed in the Australian Capital Territory, where I am based myself. So one battery should be already by development at the moment. And also there are new projects scheduled since then. So the purpose of our government here, our local government, is to shift to 100% electricity from renewable energy in Australian capital. Now, talking about batteries, I must admit that these batteries can become pretty big in size. So this is the project I'd like to show you, which is another battery under construction in China, in Dalian. And this battery is not lithium-ion battery based. This is something different. This is vanadium flow battery. And it looks pretty much like a significant building, and which is interesting. And also this vanadium flow batteries, if you're familiar with them, they are different by design. They would consist of sort of a reactor section and then external tanks that would supply electrolytes into the battery in a flow mode. And often these reactors and tanks with electrolytes, they are sort of placed on different floors in the facility. So I think this is sort of what happened here probably. So I would guess that there would be floor with reactors and floor with electrolyte tanks for easiness of serviceability. Now, lithium-ion batteries are also getting bigger. So this is an example of a very big project in California, US, where bigger battery are being completed. And it's approximately 2-3 times bigger than the battery I introduced to you from South Australia. And this is also a Tesla project. Furthermore, they expect that there will be further scale up for this battery deployment, where the battery will further increase from this size to about 5 times bigger to this sort of specification, which is very, very interesting in lithium-ion battery space. Okay, as I said, in addition to grid batteries, you can also have batteries at home. And this is very interesting again in Australia, because Australia is one of the true global leaders in PV installations at home. Has a very, very large number of solar panels installed across Australia on individual houses. So it's estimated that already significantly more than 10% of electricity generation is in the household, not provided by the grid. And this is going to grow significantly in the next 20 years. A significant number of households are currently energy producers as well as energy consumers in Australia. So these are some of the examples of residential batteries. So you can see that this is another Tesla product which can be installed at home. Or of course, systems are available from other suppliers. So this one is the system from Build Your Dreams company in China. And installation trends are also encouraging in Australia. And I have statistics which sort of goes to a couple of years back. And you can see that basically there is an increase in the number of installation. And quite a few homes that already have a solar cell, in them they would have a battery as well. So we sort of expect that batteries will penetrate more and more into being used at homes, and this will be significant and important part of future grid that needs to be managed appropriately as well. Another interesting trend in batteries in Australia is so-called community or neighborhood batteries. So this is effectively the same idea as battery at home, or you can also see it as an intermediate idea between grid battery and battery at home, because this is the battery that would be not belonging to individual house, but that would be a battery shared between a number of houses. So maybe a battery which is shared for a particular neighborhood, and sort of inhabitants of the houses in that place, they can jointly utilize these shared batteries. Of course, electric vehicles will be the primary consumer of batteries in the future. So this is just the slide which shows some of the electric cars available in Australian market specifically. So this, of course, includes Tesla's product, but also major car manufacturers now supply their electrified options. So this is a Hyundai Ioniq vehicle. There is a appropriate option from BMW as well. And of course, many cars available for purchase. And I'm sort of sure that a similar trend will definitely start emerging in Indonesia at some point, possibly with local cars even, but definitely with international car producers as well. Now, in terms of adoption of electric cars, I must admit that this was sort of uneven development around the world, which some countries deploying those electric cars on the road faster, and some countries being a bit slower. So in Australian context, I think Australia is perhaps unfortunately in the latter group, so it's not super significant at this moment. So there was about 1% of new vehicles sell electric cars recently in Australia, and this is forecasted to grow to about 4% soon. So there is a clearly an increase in adoption, but then it's still lagging some countries, for example, in Europe. Just to give a context, so in Australia, last year we were able to buy 27 models of electric vehicles, while much larger varieties are on offer in China and Europe. And also global fleet is much more significant than Australian fleet at the moment. Furthermore, some countries sort of commit to significant reduction in the number of petrol cars on the road, and even complete shift to electric cars at some point, both in Europe. So some examples are Britain and France, and of course probably Norway is the most sort of the best adopter of electric vehicles over there. And also India and China, they have some interesting targets in this space. In addition to just passenger cars, of course, electrification of other types of vehicles is also possible. So I'd like to show you some pictures here. So this is an example of airport bus, which is used in one of the Australian airports in Brisbane. Definitely electric buses can be used for this purpose. When I traveled to Jakarta pre-COVID, it was interesting to see small electric sort of buggy cars running around Jakarta airport, moving passengers around. In addition, you can also use, of course, utility vehicles. For example, this is a mining light vehicle, which is sort of manufactured or trialed in Australia. I believe this is under license from Toyota and also somehow adjusted to match Australian conditions and requirements for electric vehicle. And from memory, I think one of the big mining companies in Australia wanted to use this type of vehicles in their underground mining situation. And you can also use commercial electric cargo vehicles like this. This is just an example of another electric vehicles which is being trialed in Australia. Let me now move into talking about the dominant battery chemistry that enables all these interesting applications predominantly. And this is, of course, lithium-ion batteries, which are a very significant human invention. And as you may know, a Nobel Prize was awarded for this 2 or 3 years ago. And if we think of lithium-ion batteries, then we can say that they operate via a rocking chair mechanism, right? So this is my picture of rocking chair here. In a rocking chair, this is, of course, a system which moves forwards and backwards, right? So similarly to this, we will have the movement of lithium ions instead of batteries, right? So you will have your negative electrode, you have your positive electrode. And then the process, the electrochemical energy storage, will be happening due to a relocation of lithium ions in the negative electrode in charge state to positive electrode, which is the situation of the discharge state. And of course, each event of lithium exiting electrode and entering electrode is accompanied by electron travel in the external circuit. So if you use this mechanism, you can also do useful work in your electricity circuit, power useful devices, etc. And this is quite a nice type of battery that managed to push out other types out of business to a significant extent. And another way to sort of visualize how lithium-ion battery works is via imagining a badminton game. In badminton game, you have a couple of players that move shuttlecock between two parts of the court. And this is exactly what lithium ions do in the battery. So they sort of move to one side of the battery, and then on the recharge, they move to the opposite side of the battery. And this enables the storage of charge in lithium-ion batteries. When I'm talking about lithium-ion batteries, it should be noted that lithium-ion batteries is effectively an umbrella term, right? It's not one battery system, but instead it's a family of different batteries with the same or similar operating principle, right? And this family of batteries is enabled by having options for multiple electrode materials. So on the anode side, we can use graphite as negative electrode. We can use also lithium titanium oxide in some commercialized batteries. And currently, silicon is in development. I will talk about it a little bit more later in the talk. And in positive electrode, we also have some options. Traditional option is lithium cobalt oxide. Sorry, this is incorrect abbreviation. I need to correct myself. LCO, of course. We can also use lithium manganese oxide, lithium iron phosphate, lithium nickel manganese cobalt oxide, lithium nickel cobalt aluminum oxide. Now, importantly, you can pair this pairs of anode and cathode in different configurations, and depending which electrode materials you pick, you will end up with different battery voltages in individual cells, different energy which stored in the unit of volume or mass, different safety and speed of charge. Importantly, one, I guess, key item or another key item that enables lithium batteries is electrolyte. Traditionally, many batteries were used with aqueous electrolytes, and aqueous electrolytes, they have limitations of providing typically around 1.2 volts for the cells to have. And you cannot sort of escape this limitation because you might have water decomposition or gas evolution of the cell. Sometimes certain clever designs can be applied to boost this voltage a little bit, maybe to 1.5 or so. But then in general, you're still limited in this. And of course, when you deal with batteries, your energy, something you can store in batteries, is proportional to capacity, but also proportional to voltage. So it really makes sense to have high voltage batteries instead of low voltage batteries. And this is enabled in lithium-ion batteries via organic electrolyte. So organic electrolyte typically engages this type of salt from chemistry point of view, if you're chemistry inclined, and this type of cyclic and linear solvents. So when you prepare a liquid electrolyte solution like that, then you will end up with electrolyte that can support high voltage electrode, positive electrodes that operate up to 4.5 volts with respect to lithium metal. And then you can do high voltage batteries instead of low voltage batteries. Now I'd like to show a few common types of lithium-ion batteries. So one of them is a graphite NCM system, nickel, cobalt, manganese. And this is enabled by graphite and negative electrode, which is of course a layered system capable of ion insertion into it. And a positive electrode of this type of stoichiometry, where also layers of lithiums can exit and re-enter the structure. Now, when we have NCM battery, and there is also another variation called NCA, nickel, cobalt, aluminium, which is used, for example, by Tesla electric vehicles. So they are similar systems, and what they provide, a big advantage is specific energy. So if you need to pack a lot of energy into small volume, this can be the best or one of the best solutions. And of course, this has relevance to cars, because if you run a car, you want car perhaps to be a bit lighter and a bit smaller. You want to have more compact battery in it. Now, this comes with territory a little bit, because you can see that safety is not optimal in these cells. They may be a little bit more prone to fire than some other cells. And also their lifespan, their cyclic life, is inferior to some other type of batteries. Another common type of lithium-ion batteries nowadays is systems which consist of graphite and lithium iron phosphate, also known as LFP chemistry. So here again, you typically have graphite as a negative electrode, and you will have lithium iron phosphate, a system with channels inside of the crystals where lithium ions sit and can get out and be reinserted electrochemically as a positive electrode. So this is a different system, and it has a very different sort of profile to it, because what you can see that specific energy will be considerably smaller. So when you use this battery instead of NCM batteries or NCA batteries, you of course have to compromise the space or the weight of the battery. You need to have bigger battery or heavier battery. However, there are significant improvements in terms of safety and also cyclic life of these batteries. So you can get them, they are safer and they last longer. So currently there is an interesting trend where many entities that deal with electric vehicles, they consider either trialing or maybe even switching to LFP type of chemistry in lithium-ion batteries. But of course, the trade-off here is that you may end up with a heavier vehicle or something like this, which is not always the best solution. And another type of common lithium-ion batteries, which can be actually deployed in electric transportation, is batteries with LTO chemistry. So LTO is an umbrella name for any battery that has lithium titanium oxide as a negative electrode, and different types of positive electrodes can be deployed in this battery. So LTO is an interesting material from I guess chemistry and crystallography point of view, because it's zero strain material. It doesn't change in size where lithium gets into the structure and out of the structure. And also, interestingly, very fast quick charge batteries can be built using this negative electrode material. And one example of this is so-called supercharged ion battery produced by Toshiba. And in terms of electric transportation, we have some of these batteries deployed, for example, in electric buses in some countries, because electric buses, they can actually utilize different strategies to be recharged. Like one way is just to have very high energy battery and you recharge it rarely in depots, right, on final stops. Or another way can be to try to recharge batteries somewhere along the way as well. And in this type of situation, quick charge battery, for example, LTO type chemistry can be quite a benefit to have as well. Right, another illustration, and this just comes back again to my point about the mass and sort of the size of these batteries, right? So in a home storage market, you can have NMC type battery, and the example of this is Tesla's system. And you can have this LFP type battery, which is build your dreams battery. So what you get in this case? So with Tesla, you get this sort of very sleek, nice battery with small mass and footprint, compact, and have a lot of energy packed within a constrained space. But then with LFP battery, if you don't have space limitations, you may enjoy a longer lifetime and superior safety in this system. Okay, so I was talking a lot about batteries, and usually when I speak about batteries, I mean individual cells, because this is sort of, I guess, my area of expertise. But then I'd like to highlight a little bit that you can build customizable modules from those individual cells in this way. So if you need to improve capacity or improve voltage, you can start connecting those batteries in parallel or in series. And by using this, you can boost capacity. By using this, you can boost voltage as well. So you can come up with packs and modules with very different requirements for different applications. Right. Finally, I'd like to make a few remarks about batteries under development. So when we think of batteries under development, they sort of come in two flavors, right? So first flavor is modified lithium-ion batteries, if you like. So lithium-ion batteries are good, but it would be good to improve energy density to learn how to pack more energy within the same cell. So this is achieved via a few different ideas. The first idea is to replace the traditional graphite negative electrode with silicon. And these cells may have better energy density in them because silicon, of course, has much more capacity. Another idea is to remove alloying or insertion type electrode altogether out of the battery and use lithium metal negative electrode directly. Of course, this is often problematic because lithium metal tend to form dendrites when it cycles, and dendrites, of course, are #1 cause for fires globally. So people are sort of like really into research at the moment how we can ensure that this process can happen safely. And one of the solutions is to utilize solid state electrolytes, right? And in this way, solid state electrolytes have a hope of making lithium plating preventable or avoidable as a safety hazard. But also they're kind of cool batteries in a way because you have batteries that, you know, maybe it doesn't leak or maybe it doesn't explode. So it has different potential benefits. Another option that you can do with lithium-ion batteries, you can try to play with positive electrodes. So what if we get rid of our traditional insertion type positive electrodes and we will use elemental electrodes such as sulfur? And sulfur has its own process of reactivity with lithium where significant capacities can be attained in the positive electrode and in the cell overall. And finally, I'd like to highlight this option for advanced lithium-ion batteries, which is basically lithium-ion batteries on traditional principles, but enabled by deployment of new innovative active material in the positive electrodes as well, but different from sulfur. So it would be maybe different oxides material with potential. Okay, and then a second group of batteries under development goes into a different flavor or different interest. So these new batteries are oriented at sustainability, so they would be something that doesn't use critical elements or easier to recycle or reuse, stuff like that. And also, accidentally, some of this type of batteries also have better high power capabilities than lithium-ion batteries. At least this is what you can see in some experimental laboratories. And the sort of the prime contender in the space is probably sodium-ion batteries at this point. I'll talk more about some of those. So first, silicon system. Silicon is really a very hot material in the last year and the few years before. And here on the slide, I just collected a few newspaper headlines from around the world, where you can see that really a lot of businesses globally, they trying to deploy silicon as a negative electrode in lithium-ion batteries. And this is, of course, due to extreme capacities that might be available in silicon type electrodes, much superior to capacities in graphite. And interestingly, also silicon can not necessarily come only from mining, but silicon can be something that we reuse from other purposes. For example, silicon is a primary material for solar cells. So that's header here, for example, highlight this. A very interesting idea. What if we can reuse silicon from solar panels into battery electrodes instead? Okay, now in sodium-ion batteries, the attraction is that you can build them utilizing exactly the same rocking chair principle as lithium-ion batteries. And this is related to very similar chemical properties of sodium versus chemical properties of lithium. So of course, because it's a rocking chair system, you will have this reversible shuttling of ions between cathode and anode. And by charging this battery and discharging, you can power something useful for your purposes. Now the interest here is first abundance. So sodium will be dramatically more abundant than lithium. There are concerns in the part of the community that lithium can be quite difficult to get if electric cars really getting implemented everywhere. So if every single person on the planet has an electric car, and if recycling of batteries cannot match the deployment of batteries, the speed of deployment, then we're a little bit in trouble because there may be some issues with stock. So a part of the community, they motivated by this in their sodium pursuit. And also sodium batteries, they might avoid things like nickel cobalt, which are also relatively rare elements. And furthermore, interestingly, some people claim that if you pick your electrode materials correctly, you can achieve some nice power capability in sodium cells as well. Now, of course, with new battery systems, we have an issue of different electrodes. So if we have different battery, we need to come up with everything different. We need to find electrode materials that work. We need to think what the best electrolyte is, bind the separators, etc. So in lithium-ion batteries, we have, for example, graphite, silicon, lithium cobalt oxide, lithium iron phosphate as some of the key materials of choice. But then when we look at sodium systems, none of these materials will work adequately. Instead, we need to come up with different materials. And I guess analogs of these materials for lithium ion chemistry can be hard carbon, which is a disordered carbon material similar in behavior to graphite. Phosphorus maybe can be used instead of silicon. Sodium chromium oxide is a layered system that works in sodium batteries, but obviously it's a different type of chemistry to this. And sodium fluorophosphate was, I guess, an analog material to lithium iron phosphate in sodium space. So there is a lot of innovation required here. Now, sodium-ion batteries were really very interesting and dramatic field. So this is my graph of publication on sodium-ion batteries from 2008 to 2016, where this field really started to pick up dramatically with very large number of publications. And currently we got to the point with these cells where they actually being actively commercialized. So I know a few companies around the world, some in UK, some in France. And recently, one of the major Chinese battery manufacturers, CATL, announced that they also aim to start producing sodium-ion batteries. And it's quite interesting because they kind of seem to be willing to deploy them in the same battery packs as lithium-ion batteries. So it's like a mix and match kind of application. And the sodium-ion batteries, there are sort of, I guess, drawbacks similar to LFP chemistry in lithium, maybe even more so. And this is related to the expectation that a bigger and heavier battery will be needed for the same application, right? So you can maybe swap in the future lithium-ion battery for sodium-ion battery, but you have to be prepared that it will be, more demanding in terms of mass and space. But of course, sustainability and maybe also cost benefits, because sodium materials are sometimes cheaper. All those benefits might be appropriate for these batteries. Okay, in summary, I introduce battery applications to you. In addition to traditional ones, we're now looking at electric vehicles, grid storage, and home storage applications. Most of these applications are truly dominated by lithium-ion batteries. And lithium-ion batteries are interesting because it's really a customizable battery system where you can adjust characteristics by picking different electrode materials. And I also briefly touched on new developing battery technologies, which are focused on two areas, either packing more energy in the battery or creating more sustainable batteries with better power. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr.